Quando uma longa noite de inverno cai sobre o Alasca, 6 pessoas desaparecem sem deixar vestígios. Desvende esse mistério com Jodie Foster e Kaylee Reese, numa história completamente nova de True Detective, com um novo episódio todo domingo na HBO Max. True Detective Terra Noturna. Assista na HBO Max.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Skating Penguin Network Mailbag. It is Garrett Bahana. It is Snail. Robbie is unavailable and likely unavailable for this podcast, but he is not gone forever. As much as Snail wants him to be gone forever, he will be here eventually. Maybe just not for this podcast. But until then, we are here to answer more of your questions. Snail and I are going to do that. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions this week, as this is part 2 of this week's mailbag. Let's dive into it. Snail, question 1 is talking about the recent World Junior Championship. Question 1 comes from Brian. Let's talk about it. USA wins gold, which is surprising because every time I go on Twitter, everyone from Canada who I follow is always like, and they see USA win gold, they get all butthurt because
they hate it.
Oh, it's the absolute worst thing in the world when another country besides Canada wins a hockey-related tournament. They get so butthurt. But that's exactly what happened. USA wins gold. Snail, do you have any thoughts about the tournament and the announcement of the next World Juniors happening in Minnesota?
Yeah, so quickly, I just wanted to say, I love Canada and everything, but dude, Canada gets so bent out of shape when another country wins gold in just about any hockey tournament. I heard Scotty Upshall, former NHLer, he was ranting on his podcast, Missing Curfew, with former NHLer Shane O'Brien. And dude, he was just picking apart the US for how they celebrated blowing kisses to the crowd, which they were blowing kisses to their family. Their family was in the crowd. So I just think it's hilarious. That whole if you go listen to their recent podcast, his breakdown of just he says that even growing up playing, I think he was in the World Juniors as well. He talked about the way Russia celebrated when they won, and he held a grudge against Radulov, former NHLer. They played on the same team his whole career. He held a grudge against him the way he celebrated World Juniors victory. So I think it's hilarious. It's come on, you guys, you lost fair and square. But Garrett and I were actually just talking about the tournament before we hopped on here. I think to sum it up very nice and neatly and not get into it too much is good on USA for winning. The US development program is in good hands. They're pretty dominant. It was good to see Braden Jaromir Jaeger have a decent tournament. One of the Penguins' only prospects in their cupboard. The tournament does not feel the same without Russia, to be totally honest. I think that so much talent comes from Russia, Garrett, that it's you're doing a disservice to the tournament without having this top end. It's the World Juniors, and you're excluding an entire country that has, aside from Canada and US, there's a large portion of the talent. I mean, Matvei Michkov, when he was projected to go, I would say top 3, maybe top 5, and then he slid to 8, but he's one of those. He's going to be a stud, and we didn't get to see him play amongst his peers that he'll be playing in the NHL with, so that kind of sucks. I think they should figure that out. And as far as the World Juniors being hosted in Minnesota, I think that's awesome for Minnesota because I think Garrett and I agree that hockey is really important to Minnesota. It's the hockey state. That's built into their culture. And the World Juniors is just such a fun time of year. They have a true winter up there. It'll be the scenes from World Juniors next year will be awesome. Good for Minnesota. I think I can sum it up nice and neat. Garrett, you have anything you wanted to chime in, or you want to move on to question 2?
No, you basically took all the words out of my mouth. I mean, for the last however many years, I never really cared about the World Juniors because it's not like the Penguins had anybody of note that would have warranted me watching the tournament anyway. I watched a little bit, saw most of the highlights on Twitter. But other than that, USA, 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 USA. And yeah, that's about it.
All right, let's go to question 2 here from our pal Brian, and he asks, or he states here, was listening to the Empty Netters podcast, and one predicted that the Penguins were in playoff contention, and they make a monster trade for a right winger for Sid's line. And their other scenario predicted that the Penguins do not make playoffs. We go the other way and trade Jake Guentzel and Evgeni Malkin.
Snail, have you been seeing this chatter recently tick up about the potential trade of Jake Guentzel? Like,
Oh yeah.
not even like take Evgeny Malkin out of the equation because I don't think under any circumstance, unless Malkin himself wants to leave, which I think he genuinely loves the city too much to leave, go anywhere else. So take Malkin out of the equation. Like within the last like 10 days to 2 weeks, I've seen an uptick in Jake Guentzel chatter. And I'm not here to say that I have any insider knowledge because I don't, but the more and more of this chatter is coming from potentially not signing a long-term deal. What happens if he doesn't sign a long-term deal? And what happens if the Penguins are out of playoff contention? Do they trade Guentzel for a haul? It's so interesting to think about. Like, again, I have no sort of insider knowledge, but if I had to put money on it, I would probably say Jake Guentzel and his representatives are going to wait until the end of the season, and then they will negotiate a contract at season's end. The Penguins, for me, would have to be so far out of the race by the trade deadline. I don't know when the trade deadline is. Early March, I'm assuming.
March 8th.
Okay, so we're less than 2 months from the trade deadline. The Penguins would have to have such a massive free fall to be out of it, in my opinion, to even consider trading Jake Guentzel. One of the things you have to do if the core here is getting older, but I still think you have to make sure Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are satisfied and happy. You owe it to them to put the best team around them if they're going to continue to play here until they retire. And we all know one thing for certain. Jake Guentzel is Sidney Crosby's favorite winger. If Sidney Crosby loses his favorite winger, then what's the point of contending? Why don't you just trade Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin too at that rate? So I don't think Jake Guentzel is going anywhere. I think a lot of people are kind of getting antsy because there's been no real movement on contract negotiations, but I don't think Guentzel will be traded. I would like Dubas to swing for the fences and maybe bring in another right winger. That would be great because then you could move either one of Rust or Raquel down to the third line, and that just evens out the depth on your top three lines. I don't know what kind of leverage or what kind of tokens Dubas has to try and make a move, but that's a conversation for closer to the trade deadline, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that this chatter with Jake Guentzel is just going to go to the wire. I don't think that he's
It's going to get
anywhere.
worse. It's going to get so worse.
Dude, I saw this I saw this thing on Instagram this morning. They pretty much already traded, like fans think that he's already been traded to the Canucks for Andrei Kuzmenko
Yeah.
and like a haul of like third and fourth rounders for the next 3 years, which is just like, I'm guilty of this myself. Like, I love imagining like a blockbuster deal, and always in my head I have Chell brain, and it's just like, yeah, I can maybe like a bottom six guy and like a first round pick will just like will get me this like massive, like some superstar right winger or whatever, a centerman. It's just not how it really works. I don't know. Jake Guentzel's probably, I think this is a big moment for Jake Guentzel's career, because like he's been an amazing winger, and he could potentially really get paid. So it'll be interesting to see. I think whether the Penguins are in or out of the playoffs it depends what the margins are, I guess. But I guess like if they're a few games out of the playoffs, they're gonna keep Guentzel as like their own rental. I don't think they're going to ditch him. Cap space is so important right now. I think if he ended up walking, Dubas would be kind of rubbing his hands together like, well, that sucks to see him go, but like I have so much cap space to play with now, and that in itself is a weapon. So I don't think Pens fans should get too worried about that.
I don't even think Guentzel would walk for free. I think if if Guentzel, and I don't think this will happen, but let's say Guentzel declines to renew his contract with Pittsburgh. Before he can even test the free agent market, he will be traded for something. Dubas will trade his he'll be on an expiring contract, but Dubas will, I guarantee you, if it were to come to this, which again, I'm not saying it will, Dubas would trade his rights for something. If he were to say he's not signing. So
I could see that. Gensel's just too good of a guy. He loved Pittsburgh. He won a cup here. He says, "Let's do a sign and trade."
Positive,
I want to go. I want
yes.
to go here. We're gonna at least get you something for my. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any scenario where he walks away and the Penguins get nothing. I think he's too good of a player for that. So whether it's a sign and trade or a mid-season trade, trade deadline trade, I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to re-sign during the offseason, but that's a topic for 4 or 5 months from now.
A guy like Guentzel too, like even if he was like, I have a great time racking up points and goals on Sid's line, but he knows Sid's contract is going to come up inevitably, and there's going to be a point where the Penguins do enter a rebuild. Jake Guentzel is not a player that is worried about him not being movable either. Like if he signed a long-term deal and by year 3, the wheels fall off for Sid, Gino, and Letang, and the Penguins do enter this rebuild that's just been looming for what feels like a decade. Guentzel is not going to be worried about someone not wanting to pick him up. Like the type of player he is, I just think that he won't have a hard time finding a suitor, or Dubas finding a suitor to take on a guy like Jake.
Even if he stays and like Crosby and Malkin and Letang are retired, I always looked at Guentzel as the next captain. Like
totally,
he's 4 or 5, maybe 6 years younger than Crosby and Malkin. So I have always envisioned him as the next captain whenever that day comes. But will it get to that point? Who knows?
Guess we'll find out.
We will find out. Question 3. I guess all of these questions really are just going to be back and forth between us.
Sure.
No need to go around the table. Question 3 from Kim Larson. Do you think we should get a new coach for the power play? The power play has found new life recently. I don't know what has happened, but it's clicking now all of a sudden.
It's definitely not the detriment that it was. I think that it could be better.
But, oh yeah, absolutely.
But like if they went through that slide with so many games without, like, was it 30 games or
it was at
20?
least 30. It was at
like
least
30 NHL games or something without a power play goal. If that didn't get them a new power play coach, they're not going to get one for the rest of the season. Like, yeah. I think that they'll probably wait for an opportunity for a clean slate, probably have to have conversations with Sully on who they're bringing in next. But yeah, I see, dude, every time I see them go to the bench, like the camera pan to the bench and Reardon has that whiteboard out and he's drawing something up, I just like laugh to myself because I just feel like that's so memeable. Like I want to like take a screenshot of that and just do like what was that movie where the kid draws the dicks or something, and like that whiteboard, for all we know, could just have like penises drawn on it, or fucking squigglies, or like stick figure houses. Like sometimes I wonder what's actually going on that whiteboard. But yeah, if we haven't gotten a new power play coach by now, it's not happening this season. Wouldn't you say, Garrett?
Yeah, especially now that they've started to find their groove a little bit. Like you mentioned, I'd like to see a bit more urgency. The Philadelphia game, I tuned into the beginning of the Philadelphia game, and the power play it looked like they were determined to score. Well, really, because that was a massive game in terms of getting points within the Metropolitan Division, getting points against a divisional rival who you were fighting for playoff positioning with. So the Penguins came into that Philadelphia game with really a lot to prove, especially if they lost that game, but they didn't. And the first couple power plays they got, they looked very, very determined. They were playing with urgency. I saw the word urgency on my Twitter timeline so much when it came to the power play, and that's really what I want to see more of. I want to see more urgency. These superstars, Crosby, Malkin, Karlsson, a lot of the times, and look, they know more than I do. I've never laced up a pair of skates in my life, but you almost think, at least maybe subconsciously, that they're a bit lackadaisical with the puck because they want that Harlem Globetrotter kind of power play goal. But it looked like they threw caution to the wind almost and just put the puck on the net during the Philadelphia game. That's really just what I want to see more of. You put the puck on the net or near the net and good things are going to happen. It's super cliche, but that's why everyone keeps saying it.
They're cliches for a reason.
Exactly.
Because when you stray from it, things don't work, and then you got to get back to the basics, as they say. So it was good to see some urgency. I agree in that power play. That's what I want to see more often. And so, dude, I think sometimes that power play, the lack of urgency, when you have that much talent, I think sometimes the confidence of those players, it's not like they're, to us, it's just like it makes us pull our hair out. But for them, I think they're out there and there's just like a confidence level that they're like, we're gonna get it done, and then it doesn't get done, and they're like, anyways. We'll get off the power play talk. It's not doom and gloom right now in Pittsburgh with the power play. It's clicking better than it was, and that's not saying a whole lot, but it's working right now. They're scoring goals on the power play. It looks like they have two competent units right now too, which they did not have.
No.
Before, the first unit sometimes looks worse than the the star-studded first unit sometimes doesn't look that great, but that second unit with like Lars Eller and Letang and I think it was Rust when he came back, and that Pusin, that looked, they were snapping it around. So probably wait till next season for a new coach for the power play unit. Let's go here to question number 4 from Brian. If someone has a tattoo behind their ear, would you consider that a neck tattoo?
So if you're getting the tattoo, let's talk about tattoo placement. So yeah, I'm doing the same thing you're doing right now. So for like, Brian's not here to clarify, but the tattoo is not on the back of the ear. Like it's on that space behind the ear, but
behind the ear. Yes. So I don't think he literally means on your ear itself,
okay,
but like that area that your ear covers.
Then yes, I would consider that a neck tattoo. What about you, Snow?
Well, I don't think I would consider that a neck tattoo, because I consider the neck, here. When I see somebody on like public transportation or working somewhere like at a grocery store, and they like, it's obvious when they have a neck tattoo, but that's a little bit more hidden and concealed. I think I've seen actually a bunch of tattoos kind of back there. Would that be considered a head tattoo?
That's interesting. Maybe it would be, because if it's behind the ear, it's higher up than what would be. That's a really, I didn't think I'd be thinking this hard about the placement of a behind the ear tattoo.
So it actually says here the Cleveland Clinic. Oh no, Penn Medicine. Your neck of the woods. It states that area behind the ear is called the mastoid bone.
Is there a bone behind? Yeah, I guess there is. Yeah.
The mastoid bone is located behind the ears. It's hollow. The inside of the mastoid bone is aerated. There's a bony prominence, and it does. I see it actually lists here that it people sometimes headaches are triggered from back there. So would that maybe be evidence that the mastoid bone is in fact part of the head?
Part of the head. Maybe it would be a head tattoo, like you mentioned.
I think it's a head tattoo.
These are the great mysteries of our time, ladies and gentlemen. They go unsolved for millennia.
Brian really makes us like think way more about things than like we come on here expecting to.
Oh yeah, like I come on here and have like a surface level conversation about just about everything, but I like, before we hit record like 20 minutes ago, I did not think we were gonna have that deep of a conversation about tattoo placement on the body.
So I think the consensus, I guess, would be that after some research here from a reputable source, Penn Medicine, the mastoid bone, which is the area behind the ear, if you were getting a tattoo on that would probably be considered a head tattoo, Brian.
My opinion has changed. I originally said neck tattoo, but I will go with the evidence presented, and I will say now it is officially a head tattoo.
There you have it. All right, question number 5 here. Has Snail ever been to Cowgirls, and what's the atmosphere like there? So I don't. When I first read this, I thought he meant Cowboys, and Cowboys is a phenomenal establishment in Calgary, Alberta, and I have not been there, but I would like to, maybe a few years, a younger Snail would have really loved to go to Cowboys. But do you know what Cowgirls is, Garrett?
I just Googled it. There is something called Cowgirls in Seattle, Washington. 421 First Avenue, Seattle. Or First Avenue South, Seattle,
Oh,
Washington. Is it a gentleman's club? Or is it a bar?
it looks like it's a bar. The Wild American Saloon, located in the heart of Seattle's famous Pioneer Square. I've been to that street a million times. There's a music venue right next to there that I've seen many bands at, but I've never been to Cowgirls. And I
Oh,
have to
man.
say, looking at some of these photos, oh, they've got the mechanical bull. I have seen videos and stuff from here. This looks like a wild time. I might have to actually get boots on the ground and go. I might have to go check this place out, and then I'll report back.
Take your phone because I think you have access to the podcast Twitter. Take your phone, take a bunch of pictures, just post it to the Twitter account with no context.
No context. Yeah, just me maybe on a mechanical bull.
Yeah.
No, but again, thank you. I assume that was from Brian, or yeah, I think it was from Brian.
Yeah.
Thank you for the suggestion. So I guess I have a question now for Brian. How do you know about Cowgirls?
How does he know about cow? Wait, is this a national chain or because I didn't know what it was?
I don't know. It seems like it's. I mean, there's a lot of bars that have this shtick, um, but I've never heard of Cowgirls. I think it literally just says, "Oh wait, Cowgirls Inc." Maybe it is a chain.
There's a Reddit post that I'm looking at right now.
No, I just see Pioneer Square. Pioneer Square. It doesn't really say it's an. So I guess I'm curious, Brian. How did you find out about Cowgirls, and what are your intentions with Cowgirls?
Boy, let me see.
But I will report back on the atmosphere. I will gladly have a few drinks in there and see what the noise is all about.
All right. Well, until we will await your report, whether it comes next week, the week after, whenever you get back to downtown. Because I assume you live in the suburbs, right? You don't
I
live.
do.
Yeah, I figured.
I live like 20 minutes, 25 minutes up the freeway from like downtown Seattle. So
Okay.
yeah, not in the city. It's kind of a pain in the ass to get to the city. As I get older, it gets harder for me to get down there because I just don't have the patience or it's just annoying. But
Here's a question for you that it's not related to the mailbag. I have this question I think about a lot because I wish Pittsburgh had a better public transit system. What is the public transit like where you live in the burbs compared to like downtown Seattle?
so unfortunately, like I live far enough into the burbs that like the really good public transit cuts off like right before the little town that I live
Oh,
in.
that sucks.
They're building. We have this like train. It's not a train. It's not a tram. It's like a high speed type train that's up on these. It's elevated above the ground and then
Yeah.
it goes deep underground, which is kind of freaky. But it's a big deal out here because they're expanding it all over kind of the greater Seattle area. It's not so much isolated to just downtown. So the public transportation just with that is going to be significantly better than it's been. The bus system is actually really good in Seattle. The metro bus system is great. The infrastructure anywhere outside of the immediate downtown area, it's really not that great for walking. You kind of need a car.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that the public transit, like once you're like more towards the city, like not even like in the city, but like the suburbs that are maybe even just 10 minutes south of where I live, really, really good public transit. You could take a bus everywhere. You don't even need to own a car. And once you're downtown too, like you could pay $5 for like a transit ticket and
Yeah.
you could traverse the city forward and back a million times and then get home, and it's really price friendly. So I would say it's good, not great, but it's getting better. So Pittsburgh doesn't have the greatest public transit, you're saying?
I wish it was better. Like one of my goals that I have like for myself, like the next 3 to 5 years, I want to move because I'm still in my childhood home and I live about 45 minutes south of Pittsburgh. And there is a transit company that does have a bus here in my town, and the bus will go from my small town and it'll go into Pittsburgh. It's about like a 75-minute bus ride because there's like multiple stops along the way. So there is a bus that will go from my small town and it'll take you into the city and back. My goal is to get to move to a place. There's a light rail transit system that we
A
have,
light rail. That's the word I was looking for. But
and
yeah,
the light rail extends uh, south where I am. There's a suburb called Bethel Park, and it's about if you own a car, it's about 25 minutes south of the city, and that's where the light rail sort of gets cut off. The light rail from the south of the city, it'll take you into the city and back, and so well, it's one of the things that I was like looking into because the place that I work is located directly in downtown Pittsburgh, and one of the things that I was looking into was getting like they offer like yearly transit passes where you could you pay so much money and you get like free fares back and forth because you pay so much money. And I like one of the goals I want to have is I want to move close enough to one of these light rail stations because it's so convenient. Because I imagine most of my work in the future is going to come in or around the city, if unless I don't move like out of state, and I don't anticipate to move out of state. But so that's like a long-term goal of mine. I wish the public transit was better. They do have buses. They have a lot. They have a pretty hefty bus fleet in and around the city. But the thing about Pittsburgh compared to other metro places, metro cities, is Pittsburgh's infrastructure and like the way the city was built is so whack because you think of like Chicago and like I imagine Seattle was built the same way, almost like a grid system. I don't know how off I am on that. Like Chicago, I think of a grid system, how the city was built. Pittsburgh is like anything but a grid system. There are so many wacky, narrow ass one way streets or
hmm.
two-way streets, like almost you think they might be alleyways, but they're actually two-way streets. It is the
Oh,
wackiest infrastructure you've ever seen in your life. So that's why I wish the public transit was better. But in terms of like the light rail, yeah, we have a sort of a light rail system here that I think I'll be using in the future.
light rails are awesome. I kind of taking a page out of Europe has
I
the
know. I
best
look at it all the time.
travel. Like they just did it right over there. And when we had the Revolutionary War, we just didn't take those blueprints with us for the future of infrastructure for cities and the way that things are going to be traveled. Dude, it sucks. Seattle, when you said a grid, Seattle is like a lot like Pittsburgh, where nothing makes sense. Like a lot
Yeah.
of wackiness because Seattle was built like one. It was like built on top of like old Seattle, and like there's a lot of hills and stuff, and like the hills in Seattle are crazy.
Yeah,
So
same
it's
here.
it's kind of like San Francisco almost in a way. So it's really wacky. But the one thing about living in Seattle that is nice is like um a lot of people that live here that live in the dense part of the city don't have cars, so
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
is it's easy to they've had to make things and evolve for people to get around easier without vehicles. um and yeah, I think the light rail thing like you have in Pittsburgh, like we have here, that the city's really priding itself on that they're getting this thing going and built up. It's like it seems like it's a little bit it's like I wish we had this sooner because it's just so
Yeah,
it makes things so convenient, but
yeah.
and they're expanding it, but it's gonna, I'll be 45 years old by the time
Yeah.
it's really convenient. There's gonna be kids born and growing up in the suburbs that have really easy access to downtown and stuff that I'm very envious of.
Yeah. I agree. Well, we spent too much time talking about public transit. Let's get back to hockey. We'll talk about question 6 here from Kim Larson. Uh, Snail, who do you think has the best fan base in the league besides the Penguins?
I don't know. That's a really good question because I think sometimes when you say who has the best fan base, I think I associate that with like craze, and like craze can actually breed like some of the worst fans.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, I, Ones that I've witnessed maybe firsthand, like uh, I don't know. Like I wanted to say Toronto because, but they're like the worst fans because they're so crazy.
I hate Toronto fans. They're insufferable. They're like Chicago Cubs fans.
Um, Maybe like I don't know. Seattle fans are pretty. They're pretty excited and crazy about a team that is so new. And
Yeah.
like when I go to games, like there's like people there that don't really even probably know what's totally going on, but they're excited and happy about it. So to have that kind of blind faith towards something that you don't even really know what's going on, I could attribute that to being like a pretty good fan base. But I don't really got much for this, man. I was every fan base that keeps coming to mind. I think of like crazed fans, and like I think of like Philly fans or like Toronto fans or the Rangers fans, but all of them are insufferable.
Oh man,
Who comes to mind for you?
speaking of Philly fans, like we're talking about this right at the right time. Have you seen like all of that vitriol and hate on social media over the last like 48, 72 hours about the Cutter Gauthier trade, and like Philadelphia fans are ripping this 19-year-old kid a new one for basically saying that he didn't want to play. Cutter Gauthier has become my all-time favorite player for basically giving the middle finger to Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's like it's there's so much to unpack there because like Philly fans loved Eric Lindros, and guess how you got Eric Lindros? It was the same. He told the team that drafted him
Yep.
to essentially buzz off. He's not signing with the Nordiques or whatever, and he went to Philly, and they got one of the greatest players in their franchise history. A lot of jerseys, a lot of people wearing Lindros jerseys.
Yep.
No awareness and compassion for what this kid's going through.
Yep.
He's 19 years old, and I thought even it's like even the management pulled a Philly on him, like the president of like the team and like their GM and like Danny Briere and Keith Jones, and then like the actual like owner of the team are just like they could not iterate it enough that they don't want him. Like if you don't want to be a Flyer, good riddance. It sounded like they were truly butthurt. So talking about tying this back into which fans have the best fan base, I guess you could argue that Philadelphia has like a they are not the best fans because they will torture their own with no remorse.
They threw Philadelphia, not Flyers fans, although I would imagine a lot of Flyers fans are Eagles fans. Philadelphia Eagles fans threw batteries at Santa Claus. We've brought this up on the podcast before. I will bring it up any chance I get. That's how deranged that fan base is, throwing batteries, like AA batteries, at Santa Claus. It's just
do to Philly.
exactly like I don't get it. They are just a deranged, sad little fan base.
That is not the best fan base. Uh, God, yeah, Philly really they don't really care about that reputation they have. They kind of lean into it, it seems. So I don't know who's got a great fan base other than the Penguins. And I'm
Yeah,
sure there's people out there that are rolling their eyes saying that the Penguins have the best fan base. Like they've probably heard us on here rant about things and been like, there we go, typical Penguins fans.
every hockey fan who either has a podcast or doesn't have a podcast, every hockey fan of every team is going to say their fan base is the best fan base. Like yeah, I could talk with a Dallas Stars fan and they're going to say, yeah, the Stars have the best fan atmosphere. You know what? Speaking of I've seen some Islanders playoff games in the past, especially when they were playing at their old barn, the Nassau
Nassau Coliseum, yeah.
Like I was almost envious as a Penguins fan, seeing how rowdy like Islanders fans would get at old playoff games. So that's a good playoff crowd from the limited action I've seen.
I could get on board with that. I could agree. There you have it. Best fans uh, besides the Penguins, Islanders, maybe Seattle is up there as well. Certainly not Philly. Let's see here. Question 7 coming from Kim Larson across the pond. He asks simply, best goalie tandem in the league. And I don't know if that's actually referring to the Penguins or if he's just asking for who we think is the best goalie tandem.
I think he's just asking who he thinks the best goalie tandem in the league is.
Quando uma longa noite de inverno cai sobre o Alasca, 6 pessoas desaparecem sem deixar vestígios. Desvende esse mistério com Jodie Foster e Kaylee Reese, numa história completamente nova de True Detective, com um novo episódio todo domingo na HBO Max. True Detective Terra Noturna. Assista na HBO Max.
Boston has a pretty good tandem. Allmark and Jeremy Swayman.
I think that's it. Minnesota with Fleury and Gustafson.
Yeah. Islanders have Sorokin and Varlamov.
That's another good one.
I
mean, the Penguins right now,
now they got a good one. Yeah,
they've got a pretty good tandem at the moment with Alex Nedeljkovic and Tristan Jarry. So they're not in the same breath as like Swayman and Ullmark, but pretty good.
All right, we'll go back to Kim Larson here for question 8. If you could pick a line and a goalie with players from other teams, who would you pick? Only one player from each team is allowed. So we have to pick a goalie and a forward line, but so we have to create a forward line and take a goalie from. Yep. Okay.
That's easy for me. I could rattle this off quick. I'm going for goaltender from the Winnipeg Jets. I'm going Hellebuck. A centerman, and I'm assuming these are. I'm going to go off the board, not Penguins players, obviously here. So for a centerman, I'm probably going to have to go. I think the easy answer would be like Connor McDavid, but I'm going to go Elias Pettersson.
Oh, interesting.
And then I'm going to go left wing Matthew Tkachuk, and then right wing I'm going to go. Right wing I'm going to go.
Kucherov.
No, for some reason I was thinking someone. That's a good answer. I wasn't thinking him. Let's go with Kirill Kaprizov.
Oh, is he a right winger?
I don't know. I figured if you're a left winger, you could.
Yeah,
play
you could.
I think Matthew Tkachuk actually plays right wing, so maybe interchangeable Kaprizov and Tkachuk.
All right. Well, did you say? Oh yeah, you did say goaltender. Did you say goaltender? Okay. All right. Okay, Hellebuck. That's right. Okay, for me, I said Kucherov, so I'll take Kucherov on the right wing. Center, Austin Matthews. I'll take Austin Matthews, goal scorer, pure goal scorer.
Decent.
Left wing, I'll take Ovechkin. I'm going all offense here for this line. Ovechkin, all pure goal scorers. Ovechkin, who did I Ovechkin, Matthews, Kucherov.
That line has never seen a back check.
No, and it will continue to not see a back check. We damn defense. We don't need defense. We're gonna outscore. We're gonna win 8-6 every game. Goaltender. I haven't picked a. I'll pick. I don't know who I'd pick as a goaltender. We just talked about goaltenders. I guess I'll take Linus Ullmark from Boston.
I don't think so. Can't go wrong with that one.
No, it's a pretty safe answer there. Might not be the cool answer, but it's a safe one.
It's a good one. All right, there you have it, Kim. Let's see. Going back to Kim here for question number 9. Would you consider Rick Tocchet as a new coach when Mike Sullivan steps down in Pittsburgh? I just love the assumption there,
he's gone. He's gone. He's out the door already.
Kim Larson is just sick of Mike Sullivan. Would you consider Rick Tocchet as a new coach? When I would probably substitute if Mike Sullivan steps down in Pittsburgh. I would like to see him back in Pittsburgh, but can't see him as an assistant coach as it is right now. Boy, that's a spicy meatball of a take. What do you think, Garrett?
How old is Rick? I mean, I don't think Rick Tocchet's that old. Is he?
Let's see. He played with Mario and Wayne and all. He's got to be what, like 50?
He is 59. He'll be 60 in April.
Dude, he looks good for 59.
He does.
He doesn't have a wrinkle on his bald head.
So, Yeah, I think at this point in his career, it's probably head coach or bust for Talkett. Uh, I liked him when he was here with the power play. That was like peak Phil Kessel power play era, like that. We're romanticizing that power play compared to what's
Oh,
happening right now.
dude,
But
we took that era for granted. Like I never worried about the power play once. Like they'd go on the power play, and I think that I would actually. There was no doubt in my mind that they weren't going to score.
yeah, all they had to do was find Phil in an open lane, and he would just rip it for a one. Like he wasn't a great one timer, and but because he had so much flex in his stick, so like
Yeah.
he wouldn't be taking slap shots, but it would find like that puck would find Phil's stick, and he'd be in his little spot right there,
Oh.
and it'd be goal after goal after goal.
he I feel like later as he got later in his career, he got almost like better known for like passing and finding other players. And when you have an elite guy like Phil just dishing pucks to Sid, who's open for a one timer, Gino, who's open for a one timer, Letang back up at the point, who could then find one of those guys open. Jake, I don't know. It was just a God. What a romantic idea of that whole bringing that band back together. But I don't know. Could you see? Do you, Garrett? I guess the question here, I would reframe this a little bit, is: do you see a world where Mike Sullivan steps down from being the coach of the Penguins, and Rick Tocchet's got a good thing going in Vancouver?
He
He's
does.
got that team humming, and he's got those players bought in, which is we can see players buying into coaches' systems. That does not just happen. Like look at Ottawa. Like
Yeah.
look at like Detroit. Like look at these teams that have been just shitty for so long. They have the prospects, they have the studs. It doesn't mean that you're going to be good, but Rick Tocchet has gotten through to these young players in Vancouver. Would he leave to come back to Pittsburgh with what they've got going on? I think that that's almost the better question.
I If I was Talkett and I was offered between Vancouver and Pittsburgh, I would not take Pittsburgh. And I say that as a diehard Pittsburgh fan. Like
Right.
they have so many young pieces. Quinn Hughes, I am in love with Quinn Hughes. Like
Stud.
I would build a franchise around him 7 days out of seven. You got Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, JT Miller's older, but he's still incredibly productive. They have so many great players up there, and
Dude,
they're
Sam Lafferty.
oh god, Toronto Maple Leafs legend Sam Lafferty.
Oh, I was so pissed the Penguins got rid of him. And like he looks like Toggett. He's bald as hell, and he's just he's really like just big and like mean on the ice. And I love what he's doing with Sam Lafferty, dude. I get so jealous when I watch a Vancouver game. He's got Sam playing up on the first line at times, just like making space, like just hitting bodies, and like he's collecting points and goals up there. But then he's usually on the fourth line. He's on the penalty kill. I like that team. Just to put it lightly, just makes me kind of horny, dude. Like they've got it. They've just got. I love what's going on in Vancouver right now. And if I was talking, I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't pick Pittsburgh. I wouldn't
No,
go. I mean, he's had his song and dance with Pittsburgh. He was
yeah,
amazing for them, and the Phil Kessel whisperer.
yeah, that's what it is, and that's why I don't think it'll happen, and I don't think it should happen. This question is a hypothetical. Let's say if or when Sullivan steps down, it would be a such a meteoric collapse for Mike Sullivan to step down because so many people within Fenway Sports Group, Kyle Dubas, so many people have gone to bat for Mike Sullivan that like the Penguins would have to lose like 20 straight games for someone to be like, all right, Mike, it's not working. Thanks for your contributions. But we'll get a new voice in the room. And I just don't think it's going to happen.
I I would even go as far to say as if they lost 20 games in a row, I almost feel like they would blow it up before they would fire Mike Sullivan, because
Maybe
I
even,
think I swear I've heard it that like Dubas and management, they I think they would like Sullivan to usher in the new, he would probably they probably want Mike Sullivan's coaching to usher in the Braden Yeagers and the Owen Pickerings and the new generation of Penguins, and because he's so good with good habits. Like I've heard from other teams, or not other. I've heard from other people, coaches or whatever. When you get a player from Pittsburgh in this recent era, they're coming in with good habits from Sullivan's coaching, so they kind of know what they're getting. They're not getting a guy with a tremendous amount of flaws in their details of the game, and that's such a huge compliment to like Sullivan as a coach. I could see Sullivan even outlasting like a scorched earth rebuild, maybe even.
He's only 55. I mean, he's been here for what feels like forever because he's had so much success here already. He's only 55, so he could probably coach for at least another 10, maybe 15 years if he wanted to. Maybe he does.
Oh,
Maybe if FSG and Kyle Dubas, because Kyle Dubas was not brought in here for the tail end of the Crosby era. Kyle Dubas was brought in here, like you said, Snail, to help usher in that new era of Braden Yeager, Owen Pickering, whoever else Kyle Dubas decides to draft in the future. That's what Dubas is here for. Dubas is here for the long game, and I think that's why FSG gave him a 7-year contract. Like, we're here, he's here to make sure the ship is right and tidy when Crosby and Malkin are gone. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that Mike Sullivan would be here as well with Dubas.
how long has Mike Tomlin been the coach for the Steelers?
17 seasons.
17. That doesn't exist in hockey, like that kind of
No.
like tenure as a coach. But we're seeing it with the John Cooper in Tampa,
Yeah.
and Sullivan. You know, he came in that next year after. I think he's only like a year behind a Coop. I mean, there's a reason these guys have kind of stuck around this long. Usually, I think isn't the average coaching lifespan of it for a team like 3 years or something.
That sounds right to me because it seems like, yeah, you get a 2 or 3 year period, and if it's not working, you get a new face in there and see if you have another 3 year period.
It's hard to kind of convey maybe, but it's like despite the Penguins, you know, they've had that immediate great success that when he came in, they won
Yes.
2 cups.
It was
and then
immediate.
and then kind of it's kind of fizzled off more and more every year.
Yeah.
Sullivan is still such a good coach that like you don't really want to get rid of him, because if Sullivan got fired or let go, there are teams around the league that would fire their coach right then and there to then throw bags of money at him.
If Mike Sullivan, it is 6:32 Eastern time as we record this. If Mike Sullivan got fired at 6:35 Eastern, he would be hired at 6:40 Eastern. That same, like, I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Like, the people would be begging him to coach their team. And you know what? The players, we've seen on multiple occasions. I've read article after article. The players love playing for Mike Sullivan. And
Even Gino, I've heard Gino praise Mike Sullivan, which is
yes,
crazy.
Sidney Crosby wants no other coach than Mike Sullivan. That has been confirmed, maybe not on record in a media scrum, but I've read countless things that have said Sidney Crosby wants Mike Sullivan as the head coach. And you know what? Whatever Sidney Crosby wants, Sidney Crosby should get.
Well, it's not just, I agree. It's not just that, though. It's like Sid knows at this point in his career, he's not asking for Mike Sullivan to coach him. He's looking for a coach that's going to coach the players
Sidney Crosby doesn't need coached. Yes.
No, he
yeah,
doesn't
you're
need
right.
to be coached. Sid's looking out for probably what Sullivan would bring as far as like coaching the new blood on the team and getting the most out of, because Sid wants the most out of the players around him, and Sid can't do that by himself. He needs a coach that can get through, and so he clearly trusts that Sullivan is able to do that. And it's not that Sid needs Mike Sullivan to coach him, and you know what I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, Sidney Crosby does not need a coach. He is a coach at 36 years old. He does not need someone else to tell him how to do his job.
Precisely. So yeah, I don't see Rick Tockett's not coming back to Pittsburgh anytime, as much as like maybe in some weird other like alternate universe it would be cool to see him back here, but he's had his time in Pittsburgh. We thank him for his services, and I'm honestly really happy for Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, same
the
here.
Success he's having.
Like he was, I remember he was broadcasting. He was on TNT's coverage, like when TNT got the hockey rights, and then he gets that job in Vancouver. And like you said at the start, look at what Vancouver is doing right now with all of the young pieces they have there. I wouldn't want to leave that at all. I'd like you said, that he has Vancouver humming, hitting all the right buttons over there. So.
And Vancouver is, if you're a successful team or a coach in Vancouver, that's a Canadian market. That goes, you're like above Trudeau. If you're a successful coach in a Canadian market, you don't have to pay for meals. You don't have to pay for beers. You're essentially a god over there. So I wouldn't trade that for the world, honestly.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. Yeah, those Canadian franchises are so desperate for anything resembling a championship that now that they got Vancouver cooking, they're like, all hail our mighty Lord and Savior, Rick Puckett.
Yes. And I mean, right now, the two best teams in the league are Canadian, with Winnipeg somehow being the best team in the league stats wise or whatever. I saw that they're number one, and then Vancouver right there too. That, I mean, I think it's awesome for Canada. They deserve it. All right, let's move on here. What do you say, Garrett? To question number 10, coming from Kim again. Would you put Drew O'Connor on the Crosby line and put Raquel with Malkin, or even on the third line?
O'Connor has had something of a resurgence here. Looks like he's playing with a lot more confidence. Would I put him on the Crosby line? No, I wouldn't, because Rickard Rakell looks like a new man since he's come back from injury. And so you're not going to take Guentzel off the Crosby line. I think I saw a stat the last game they played, the Penguins played. Rakell, he scored in the last game. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, power play goal.
Yeah. And that was the Philadelphia game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw there was a graphic that played during the broadcast. I think he had 5 goals in his last 8 games when he didn't have a single goal in like the first 20-something games that he played. He is a new man right now, and he has found his confidence once again after coming back from injury. I would keep Raquel, Crosby, and Guentzel together. Who is Rust is Malkin's right winger right now?
Currently, yeah. Rust is coming back from injury. I wouldn't be surprised to see Rust back on Sid's line eventually.
I probably,
but things are just humming so well with that first line.
I don't want to touch that first line. That's
No.
I just don't want to touch it. So
let's be honest. I mean, dude, with the way the injury bug affects this team, like Drew O'Connor will probably get reps with Sid's line at some point.
Yeah.
I would even argue maybe that if I'm moving Drew O'Connor up into the lineup at all, when he's played in the top 6 role, the best games I've seen him have are with Malkin. He seems to have a little bit of a more chemistry with Gino. They've connected for some sick goals. Drew O'Connor's he's kind of, I think Sullivan must be coaching him a bit. He's really figuring out that his strength in the NHL is fetching the puck and going to the net.
Yeah.
And when you have creative superstars like Sid and Gino, that just makes their job and your life really easy. If all you have to do is go to the net, you're a north-south guy. And I'd probably rather see him on Gino's line when Riley Smith isn't really getting it done. Riley Smith on a Lars Eller line or something. That's probably more of the shakeup I'd be looking for.
I do the same. Yeah, I do the same thing. I don't know. O'Connor is is he a left-hander?
Yeah, left.
Okay, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of like wildness to have O'Connor on the left wing of Malkin, because Riley Smith right now he's in a little bit of a funk offensively. I wouldn't be opposed to that. O'Connor, Malkin, Rust right now. I wouldn't mind that at all.
Wouldn't mind that one bit.
We'll go to question
11.
Question 11. All right, we're staying with Kim here. Kim says, I feel that in some games we have the best goalie tandem, but just as you think that no goals are allowed, we allow 5 or 6 goals the very next game. We are so inconsistent at that position. Snail, do you agree?
I don't agree, because I think that our goalie tandem is actually pretty good. And as sour as I've been on Jari and like that contract he got at the beginning of the before the season started, it has become abundantly clear to me now that it is not necessary. I mean, okay, all goaltenders will give up a bad goal from time to time, but it's the team, dude. The team sometimes plays night and day different in front of Nedeljkovic than they do Jari. And I've said this on here before. I feel like there have been numerous games where they've thwarted a great performance by Jari by just having no structure in front of him and making him have to make the unorthodox acrobatic saves. He looks like he's flopping around in the net. They're piling on the goals. It's when they're getting that many scoring chances and they allow 5 or 6 goals in a game, that's not because the goalie isn't seeing the puck well necessarily. Those chances are coming from poor structure and bad defense. And when you've got, I like a couple games ago, I noticed it was late in the game and it was Erik Karlsson and P.O. Joseph in front of, I believe, Jari. And that's not the defensive pairing you want late in the game to keep bad things from happening in front of your goaltender. So I think we do have a really good goalie tandem. And I think that it's the inconsistency with the structure that plays in front of him that really leaves them high and dry at times.
Yeah, I can't really disagree. It's weird because on paper you look at like Kim mentions, like Nedeljkovic will go out and post like a 935 save percentage, and then Jari gets in the net next game, and he has it's no secret Jari has had mental lapses. Even this season, he's had mental lapses, and you hate to see that from a goaltender you're giving over $5 million to, but it's inevitable with the kind of player he is, and that's not a detriment to him. It's just again the kind of player he is. You mentioned, I think, during the last mailbag that the team, for whatever reason, seems to play steadier in front of Nedeljkovic than Jari. I don't know if there's any real evidence to back that up, but it certainly seems that way when you're watching it on TV. For whatever reason, they play more structured, and Nedeljkovic keeps them in the game. Like you mentioned on the previous mailbag, Nedeljkovic is a cool customer, more of a cool customer in the
Quieter.
net. Yeah, quieter than Tristan Jari. So from that perspective, I can definitely see there being some truth to that. But I mean, we put the Penguins under so many different microscopes because we watch them. I wouldn't be surprised if there are 18 or 19 other goalie tandems in this league that can go out there and post a 970 one night. 2 nights later, they give up 5 goals. It's just the nature of the beast, I think.
Yeah, and Jari has been streaky at times. Like Jari, I think has like the most shutouts by a goaltender this season, I believe. Or if he's not, he was at one time. He did have the most shutouts, but he also has been pulled like a bunch of times this season too. So whether you chalk that up to just being kind of how the game goes, or if it's just Jari's kind of a little bit more streaky of a goaltender, because I think you could agree at times Jari has been in his short career. It feels like he's been a goaltender for a long time. In his short career, he's been streaky. He can look like a Vezina candidate, and he's been an all-star. And then sometimes, you're shaking in your boots thinking of him being in net.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's the highs and lows that come with being a goaltender that I would never want to deal with.
Imagine your child or someone being a goaltender.
Oh God, the scrutiny that they'd be under.
Yeah. All right, let's go here to question number 12, and this is the last question from Kim Larson on this mailbag. Thank you, Kim. Would Crosby get in your top 5 all-time list?
This is a question that I have been thinking about for a little bit, because since I put the outline together, and this was one that I was going to roundtable whether Robbie was here or not. So let's go through it. Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, probably Gordie Howe, Bobby Hull. That's 4 right there. I mean,
yeah, it's like who you pluck out of that, like that's what it's like I have a hard time with it, but then because they meant so much maybe back in the day during their generation, like
yeah,
like in like 50 years they might be talking about like, oh, I'm gonna pluck Sid out of that top 5 because this new guy that's not even born for another 20 years has surpassed everything that Sid's ever meant to the league. Let's see, Wayne Gretzky, he's got to be there. Like, he's cemented, right?
Yes. The same for Mario. He is,
and Mario as well.
Yes.
And then there's Gordie Howe is Mr. Hockey. Like, he played until he was like 50 years old.
Yes.
He was tough. Wayne had to move heaven and earth to break his goal scoring record. I think that Gordie means a lot to hockey, no matter when you're born or whatever. He's just like he's a top figure there. And then there's Bobby Hull, there's Bobby Orr, and I've even heard the argument for Steve Yzerman.
Yeah, and you know who we haven't mentioned? I meant to say Bobby when I meant to say Bobby Orr instead of Bobby Hull.
Bobby Hull was a legend too, though.
Yes, exactly. We you know who we didn't mention? We haven't mentioned once. Jaromir Jagr. I could see Jaromir Jagr being on a top five list too.
Yeah, he's kind of like a modern Gordie Howe in a way, with just the longevity of his career, and he's still lacing up the boots, racking up assists. Uh, I think Sid has to be on it, even though because he's not done writing his story yet.
I think he's on the bubble. I don't know if I like. I love Sidney Crosby as much as the next guy. I just don't think right now. I don't at number six or number seven. Yeah, absolutely. And Ovechkin would be right behind him at 6 or 7 or 8. I just Mario, Wayne, Gordie Howe, Bobby Orr basically revolutionized the game for defensemen
He
that we
did.
take for granted now. Again, and then like Yager would probably round out my top five, honestly.
And I
Uh,
don't think anyone can be mad at that.
I mean,
I
it's all subjective anyway, but yeah, I mean, I just do you have an argument for Sidney Crosby being in the top five?
aside from just like just my overall fandom of him and everything he kind of brings, with the expectations he came into the league with and
True.
exceeding them, what he did for the Penguins organization and also the NHL at the time he came in is arguably, like, it's almost on a similar level. Like when Wayne got traded to like Los Angeles, he kind of sparked hockey in the South. It's not the same, but like the NHL was coming out of a lockout, and it was on Versus, and it was on like weird channels. And then once Sid and Ovi came in, all of a sudden there was a lot more hockey fans in the country, and I think probably in the world after they came into the league. Sid, you know, being in Pittsburgh, I'm sure he did the franchise was moving to Kansas City, and now the Penguins have two more cups in the city of Pittsburgh, or they've got three Stanley Cups in the city of Pittsburgh since he's came into the league. I don't know. I just think that just in those things alone are so seismic. And then not to mention that he came into the league with as a skilled playmaker, point getter. He's going to be the next one. But he plays with like the tenacity and grind that a fourth liner does, and he doesn't shy away from all the things that are important to the sport of hockey, the physicality, the contact. He's overcome injuries. He's a battler and a grinder. I think just everything he embodies to me as a hockey player, a well-rounded hockey player, is just so like important to the sport, and so important to many people out there, their fandoms of the sport. Those are the reasons why I'm like, I think he's got to be top five. Like, I think he pushes out, and on my list, he would probably edge out. Like, I think at this point, and no disrespect or anything, but like, I would put him above maybe like a Jaromir Jagr. Like, I think he's number five. He's number five. It's Wayne, Mario, Gordy, or Sid.
I can't argue with that. And like I I can't, yeah, because I mean it's so subjective. And
It
like
is.
you mentioned that Crosby is still writing his story.
Mhm.
While I don't think that Crosby is probably I don't think he's going to win the Hart. I don't think he's going to win the Rocket Richard anymore. But he's probably going to play for 3 or 4 more seasons, assuming health permitting.
Mhm.
Maybe by the time that he really hangs it up 3, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, maybe if we revisit that discussion, I might have a different answer for you for my number five. But I can't argue with it and say you're wrong because,
Yeah.
Crosby has meant so much to this franchise, like you mentioned, saving it from the doldrums, much like his predecessor Mario Lemieux did. So again, I can't fault anyone for having Crosby in their top five.
So if we don't agree and we don't come to a consensus, but for Kim Larson's sake, I hope that gives you some fodder to make a decision for yourself.
Yeah.
I would like to know, Kim, is Sid a top five on your list? Why don't you tweet us that and let us know who's on your Mount Rushmore, as they call it. All right, let's get to the last question here. What do you say, Garrett? From Edward Beckham, another pal from across the pond. It'd be funny if he wasn't, because I've said that so many times, and he's actually from like Illinois.
New Jersey. He's from New Jersey.
What do you believe is the main reason why there's been an improvement from Carter from last season to where he's at now?
That's a good question. I think because last season he was incredibly magnified, and he was also in a position that I don't think his legs could handle. He was relied on
He
in
was third line center last year.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think now he is in less of a magnified role on that fourth line. Um, it sucks that you're paying a quote unquote fourth liner almost $4 million, but we've said it 1,000 times on this podcast. Jeff Carter was the whipping boy last season. He's not so much this season. But Carter's contract comes off the books, and then that money can go elsewhere, hopefully to something more productive. But Carter is what he is. I think he has fresher legs because he's not relied on as frequently. He doesn't need to be a shutdown third line centerman. I think the less of a microscope has been put on him. So maybe he is playing like this is the last year, and he's just going to leave it all out on the ice. He hasn't said he's going to retire, but he's definitely not going to be in Pittsburgh next season. I can guarantee you that much.
I would agree. I think even just shaving off those minutes from a third line center to being he's almost like a special teams guy in football, where they throw him out there for a defensive face-off draw or something, because whether we like to admit it or not, he can win face-offs pretty well, even at his age, and he shuffles his big ass off the ice as soon as he wins it, which I think always looks hilarious. I don't want to get too sentimental or try to play psychologist here, but after last year and the way he's kind of gone about, whether it's interviews or even just like kind of his demeanor on the ice while they were going through tough times and sitting in the press box and as a healthy scratch, I wonder if maybe after last year he had maybe like you got to think that maybe he had a moment where he was like, okay, like he's had an incredible career. It probably takes a lot for an athlete to come to the conclusion that they're like, I don't got it anymore. Like Garrett and I probably will never go through a situation like that in our lives where we're looking at ourselves just being like, we just don't got it anymore after being so successful like he was, like Carter was at hockey. You got to wonder though, if maybe this year I'll use the term bought in. Maybe he's truly bought into like, I'm not a third line center on a Stanley Cup contender anymore. Isn't he like 39 years old? He's 39. He's he's big Jeff Carter, big frame. It's those big frame athletes tend to break down a hell of a lot sooner than Jeff Carter did. I think he's buying into his role and accepting his role as, he's not an everyday NHLer. He is a fourth line, just barely getting out on the ice compared to where the role he used to take on. So I think maybe it's got to be a healthy combination of just the role he's been put in to succeed. Sullivan and Kyle Dubas have probably, broken it down to him that our team is best when you're in this role. And it's got to go to both ways, where Jeff has probably had a coming to Jesus moment. And I say that jokingly, but being like, this is it for me. Like, this is where it's at. And you have to be okay with that to go out and execute it every night. So probably a combination of both of those.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Well, that's 13 questions in, 13 questions out. You have anything else you want to add, Snail, before we wrap this shindig up?
No. Or actually, yeah, just quickly, the Penguins play tonight. They play the
Vancouver Canucks.
The Vancouver Canucks. Rick Tocchet is in town.
Mm-hmm. Jim Rutherford's in town. Patrick Alvin is in town.
Oh boy, I wonder if if there's any greetings being exchanged. This will be an awesome game. I think I don't wanted to touch on this. This is, how they always ISO cam in on like when Sullivan and Torts' teams play each other. They ISO cam in on Sullivan and Torts, and they kind of show photos where Torts brought up Sully everywhere he went.
Yeah.
Tocchet had his best run in as a coach before this season as Sullivan's assistant coach in Pittsburgh. So I just think this will be awesome to see. I don't really necessarily want to call Tocchet like Sullivan's protege, but Tocchet definitely learned a hell of a lot from Sullivan. So it'll be cool to see these two teams go head to head. It's a young up-and-coming superstar-laden team against a superstar-laden team, all veterans. I think this will be awesome, and Robbie and I will be back later. Robbie did confirm he will be back later with the game recap tonight. That's all I got, though, Garrett.
Alrighty. Well, for Snail, for Robbie, I have been Garrett Bahana. Thank you so much for listening to another edition of the Skating Penguin Network Mailbag, and we will talk to all of you again very soon.